number one enemy of America is the American people.
You've mentioned in one of your tweets that it's one of the honors of your life to pay respect and tribute to Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, especially in his funeral.
I'd say anyone who's fighting the imperialist deep state is a brother of mine. Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah was a leader and he was a true revolutionary.
Why do you think the US decided on supporting this Zionist regime?
What the US government does is controversial. It's controversial that we have at least 40,000 civilians who were killed in Gaza.
But might serve the US interests.
Well, again, I'm an American, so it's not really for me to say, but I will say as an outside observer that Israel is weaker today than they were on October 6th of 2023.
حلقة جديدة من سردية عز في موسمه الثاني، وسعدتم أوقاتا. ضيفي اليوم هو جاكسون هينكل. Jackson Hinkle, you're most welcome in the podcast سردية عز. Actually, you are a political commentator and activist known for your vocal support of Palestine and Lebanese causes, as well for your critiques of Western imperialism. Your presence on social media platforms, particularly X, formerly Twitter, has been both influential and controversial. Very controversial. So why are you causing this controversy? Isn't it that costly to support causes as the Palestinian cause, as the Lebanese cause, this offensive tweets and offensive posts against the Israeli entity, against the Zionist regime? Why did you choose this path? Isn't it that costly?
I think it's, well, first of all, thank you for having me on.
My pleasure.
And I'm very happy to be in this beautiful country. Like we were just saying, I love it so much. And hopefully I'll come back many times. But as for the controversial stuff, it's like what the U.S. government does is controversial. You know, starting all these wars, toppling foreign governments, assassinating leaders, all these things, the sanctions that they place on innocent civilians all across the world. In my view, that's controversial. And for some reason, no one in the mainstream media thinks it's controversial. It's controversial that we have at least 40,000 civilians who were killed in Gaza. And really, the number is probably much, much higher. Donald Trump is saying that the population in Gaza has decreased from 400,000 to 500,000. I don't know where he's getting those statistics. If he's saying that, you know, people that support Hamas aren't technically civilians, I don't know where he gets these numbers. But what they've done is so controversial, and it's become normalized. So I think when people try to have these serious debates about Gaza and U.S. policy in Gaza, U.S. policy with Israel, it's like, well, this is not even really worthy of a serious debate because it's not serious to actually entertain these ideas. They should be viewed as controversial, and we should call them out for their hypocrisy and for the insanity that it all is.
But it might serve the U.S. interests. If it serves your country's interests, you're making sure that you're exporting lots of arms, of weapons. You have an arm in the region. Your interests are well taken care of. So why shall you resist this narrative that the U.S. have?
The U.S. never had any enemies in the region until Israel was created. So it's why can't we have, for example, Iran, one of the largest producers of oil, gas, so on and so forth. Why can't we just have good, open, fair relationships with countries like Iran rather than trying to topple their governments? And then Iran says, okay, well, we're not going to do business with you. We're going to go to Russia. We're going to go to China and create this
with the BRICS countries
world.
As well. Yeah, why not? You've had lots of troubles with Iran since 1979 till the year maybe 2015 when Obama closed a nuclear deal with Iran back then. When Trump came, he just deleted that deal. He considered that it doesn't exist. Then we hear a lot of back and forth of signing a deal, not signing a deal. Why do you think the U.S. decided on supporting this Zionist regime, and you decide to combat this argument which you've just mentioned?
I think that it's a long and difficult question. I think that there's a lot of compromised individuals that support Israel and the U.S. government today through blackmail, political pressure, and sometimes there's financial incentives that are provided by the Israel lobby. And that's why it continues unto this day. But when it started, you know, I mean, there was a lot of Zionists who, I mean, Hitler was a Zionist. He said he wanted to send the Jewish people out, and he said maybe we'll send them to Africa. Hitler even minted a coin with the Zionists. The
Exactly.
Nazis and the Zionists minted a coin together. So there's lots of people that wanted to do this, and they chose Palestine. And then now it's become so unpopular that they literally have to blackmail politicians through enterprises like Jeffrey Epstein, getting them into these crazy situations to continue support for Israel.
So you decided to come to Lebanon and you've mentioned in one of your tweets that it's one of the honors of your life to pay respect and tribute to Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, especially in his funeral. Don't you feel that such kinds of posts would have negative repercussions on your career, on your path, especially with the closure of many of your accounts on different social media platforms, including Twitch and YouTube?
Well, having your accounts closed or banned is really nothing compared to what the people of Lebanon and Gaza have been through over not just the past 15 months, but for generations. So I think that it's just the truth. And it's like, this is one of the greatest honors of my life. There was a lot of problems as to whether or not I was going to be able to come. Nothing from my government, just logistical issues. And I fought so hard to make sure that I could come and be here because I did consider it to be that sort of a huge honor, one of the biggest of my life. And people
Did you face any impediment or barrier on your way here?
Well, I came from Moscow, so I came from Doha, actually.
Okay.
We did the interview with Hamas there, and then now we're here, and we'll probably do an interview with some other guys here and that are not friends of the U.S., and we'll see what happens when I eventually go back to the U.S., if it created problems.
You have a home in Lebanon if you were forbidden.
That's not a bad thing. It's beautiful here.
Yeah. So your follower count on X has seen a significant increase, especially during recent conflicts involving Israel and Palestine. To what do you attribute this surge in followers?
I think it's just the fact that you're having people across the world hear an American speak about the truth. Because for so long, no one would hear Americans say anything other than what the mainstream media allows Americans to say. So they only invite on certain people that will agree with the State Department and the president. But now with social media, and we have these major conflicts that are playing out for the first time during the social media era, like the Russia-Ukraine conflict, like what's happening in Gaza, what's happening in Lebanon. People are like, oh, wow, there's Americans that actually don't want to see us all bombed or killed. And I think people are interested by that.
So you faced removals from platforms like Twitch, as I've said, and YouTube due to alleged misinformation, as the founders of these platforms mentioned. How have these experiences shaped your approach to content creation and to dissemination of the information that you have?
Well, obviously, you don't want to ever self-censor and stop yourself from saying the truth, right? Just so you can stay on a platform and not get banned. But I do think that, it's important to keep the platforms and keep your accounts on these platforms so you can share as much of the truth as possible for as long as possible. So I've been banned everywhere pretty much except for Twitter and TikTok and Chinese social media, oddly enough. Everyone says China is so censorious, but we've got 2 million followers there too. It's crazy.
Wow.
But I think what shaped my view about it just goes to show that even on these so-called free speech platforms where you're supposed to have free speech as an American citizen, you don't if you critique the foreign policy establishment.
So you were covering, for example, the guerrilla warfare which the Lebanese resistance had with the Israeli entity. Do you think, so it was kind of grassroots initiatives, as you know, when it was formed in the year 1982. Do you think that these grassroots media outlets, as your social media platforms, have more impact on telling the narrative that we want to be told, and this narrative for the first time has an upper hand in the history of the struggle with the Israeli entity?
Oh yeah. I mean, I can't speak about the media here. I mean, we were just talking about how I got invited on the Iranian news channel 3 yesterday. Yeah. And the response was crazy. It's like everyone is still watching, and on social media, but still watching these channels in Iran, for example. But in America, no one trusts the mainstream media at all. So the mainstream media might get 60,000 views on their prime time news segment about the Gaza genocide. But then, we have 10 people like myself and you and all these other people who are doing tweets, and each tweet gets 10 million views.
Definitely.
Yeah. So it completely changed the playing field.
Speaking of this, the ADL identified you as one of five key far-right influencers on X who had used the conflict to gain an audience. That's what they claimed. And whose combined follower count increased by over 1,070% in the period since October the 7th, reaching over 2.8 million followers on X. How do you respond to this accusation?
I gotta say, thank you to the ADL and AIPAC for making my work so easy. You know, they tell such crazy lies. The Zionist media, the Israeli government, their lies every single day. Even this week, they say that Hamas killed the Bibas babies from Israel, the hostages. And it's like, no, Israel bombed them months and months and months ago, and Hamas offered to free them at the start of the conflict. So they tell so many lies that people like yourself and myself, our job is easy. All we have to do is just simply show the truth, and more people will see that and resonate with it and, tune in to what we talk about.
Speaking of Hamas, in a previous interview, you mentioned that Hamas shouldn't surrender as they are fighting for their land. Could you elaborate on your perspective regarding Hamas's role in the Palestinian resistance? How do you perceive their role?
Well, I think...
And do you think from a cost-benefit analysis, the benefits of October 7th outweigh the costs or not, from a utilitarian approach, if you may say?
Well, again, I'm an American, so it's not really for me to say, but I will say as an outside observer, I can say with total clarity that Israel is weaker today than they were on October 6th of 2023. Economically, politically, diplomatically, on the international scale, and also militarily. They lost many troops, more than they ever allowed to. Yeah. They usually stop an operation after 2,000 killed, but now they have 10,000 maybe killed in this conflict in Gaza alone. So yes, they are closer to having a Palestinian state. China, the most powerful country on the face of the earth, is actively working to ensure that as reconstruction takes place, that, a two-state solution, which is not something that I endorse, but China does, is on the table and being pursued, actually.
You're that extremist, yeah? You don't endorse it.
I don't believe in Israel at all. I don't think it's a real country. It's like Hogwarts and Harry Potter. It's like it's a fake place. But there's many leaders across the world who agree with that they don't recognize, presidents and prime ministers.
The Lebanese resistance as well in Lebanon doesn't endorse this argument at all.
Yes.
So you've talked about the emergence of new generations in Palestine in the aftermath of October 7th. So you've expressed optimism about a new generation of Palestine rising. What characteristics define this new generation, and how do you envision the impact on the future of the region?
Well, I think it's with every single country that is in this multipolar world or, anti-imperialist states, for example, the next generation that is rising up has seen everything that the United States has done for the past, 5-10 years. They have seen it. They've lived through it. They lived under it. They have suffered because of it. So these kids are now, they're turning 18, they're turning 19, they're growing up. And whether they're in a resistance group, whether they are going to be future politicians, they understand that they can never trust the West. They can never trust the United States, and that these countries can never make an agreement that will last.
Despite not trusting the West and this multipolar world, first I want to ask if it's a multipolar world or not. And even if we don't trust this multipolar, the West in this multipolar world, the West, the US, through its arm in the region, which is Israel, at the end, some have an argument that they're doing what they aim at doing. They've killed the top Palestinian leaders, all Hamas leaders, many of the Lebanese resistance leaders, the Islamic resistance leaders, including Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah. So how do you express that? So it's a multipolar world, yet the US is doing what it intends to do.
Well, I'll say quickly about the resistance. Yes, it's obviously clear that there are many martyrs, civilian fighters, leaders of the resistance, and it was tragic and obviously a big blow to the axis of resistance. It wasn't all a walk in the park. It wasn't perfect. But what I can reflect on, Henry Kissinger, famous American diplomat, official, He was talking about Vietnam when he said this quote. He said, in a war between a conventional military like Israel and a guerrilla military like Hezbollah or the Palestinian resistance, if the guerrilla side of the conflict manages to survive, simply survive, then they're victorious.
Yeah.
If the other side, the conventional military, if they don't completely eliminate the guerrilla enemy,
Definitely.
then they lose.
And this applies to Lebanon and to Palestine.
Of course.
Because neither Hamas nor the Islamic resistance in Lebanon, they've gained more power. And
They're stronger in manpower.
Yeah, exactly. They're stronger despite the martyrdom of their leaders, and this is apparent in the funeral of Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah and the preparations of the funerals.
Yes.
So you've witnessed that. A side question: what does Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah mean to you?
Well, I was thinking about that yesterday. One of the things I say about him is, as an American, I have to recognize that people say, the number one enemies of America are Russia or Iran or China or something like that. And it's not true. The number one enemy of America, of the government in America, is the American people. They view us as their biggest enemy, right? Of course, Hezbollah and Hamas are also enemies of the American government, which means that I am a brother in arms with Hezbollah or Hamas or Russia or China against this imperialist deep state that, for example, also tried to kill President Trump. They tried to assassinate him because he wanted an end to the conflict in Russia and Ukraine. He's not so good on Israel, but he was good in Russia and Ukraine, and they tried to kill him. So I say anyone who's fighting the imperialist deep state is a brother of mine. And of course, Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah was a leader in that, and he was a true revolutionary, and also someone that preached the unity of all our faiths, especially of Christians and our Muslim brothers. And I found his speeches on that to be particularly insightful, and I think it woke a lot of Christians up that, the narrative about, Hezbollah being a bunch of crazy Islamist extremists, as some politicians say, is not true. Very pragmatic people and good people.
Yeah, they try to create a kind of simile to Al-Qaeda or to Al-Nusra Front or to other extremist military groups, which you found the real scene contradicts with this media's claim. Yeah,
of course. And then look at the United States.
Yeah,
the United States, governed by Christian presidents, puts Jolani into power in Syria, who is, notorious for killing a bunch of Christians.
Jolani or Ahmad Shara?
I'm going to continue calling him Jolani, even though he got the beard trim and he's got the Rolex on. But, they put the guy who's killing, Christians and Alawites and stuff as president, and he was dancing in the street on 9/11. But then Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, who's preaching about the unity of Christians and Muslims and liberating our people and fighting to keep Christians and Alawites alive in Syria during the war that lasted for so long in Syria. They say that he's the enemy. No, he's not the enemy. He's the hero in this story.
I'd like to ask a bit about the intersection of political ideologies and activism, talking about MAGA and Free Palestinian advocacy. You've been involved in organizing Free Palestinian events or Free Palestine events and have been associated with the MAGA movement. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, well, I didn't vote for Trump, first of all. I think that's a lot of people get the impression that I voted for him. I was a big supporter. I have a lot of friends in the Trump world and Trump administration and whatnot, but I'm not going to vote for anyone who's endorsing a genocidal regime in Israel.
So you voted to neither the Democrats nor the Republicans?
I didn't vote for anyone.
Okay.
I didn't like any of them. But when it comes to the Trump movement, one thing that's very important for everyone to think about is that you have Trump, and then you have the Trump supporters, which are working class Americans. Maybe they believe some of the propaganda that they hear in the media about Hezbollah or about Hamas, right? But overall, these people are just working class Americans that want to see peace around the world, and they want to have economic prosperity in America. And I resonate with those people because when they learn about what's happening, how we're sending our taxpayer dollars to fund a genocide or to fund the destruction of South Lebanon and Beirut and these sorts of places, it's like, well, when they hear that, they're like, okay, well, I don't support that. Killing 2,000, 3,000 civilians in Lebanon, I don't support that. Why are my taxpayer dollars going to that? Very pragmatic people, the Trump supporters, most of them, not all of them. And So that's why I get associated with the Trump stuff, because I'm like, well, I like these people and I think they can be won over. I think if you talk to them like adults and have a good conversation, you hear their side, I think that many of them will come to the conclusion that funding this imperialist project all across the world is not a good idea and it does not benefit the American people.
Yeah, and that's what you mentioned yesterday, a few days ago when you were visiting the southern Lebanon. You've said that you've seen the tax dollars which the American citizens are paying, and this was reflected in the destruction, massive destruction on the southern borders of Lebanon with the Israeli entity. Accusation of anti-Semitism. So this is a major accusation which you always face. So reports have linked your content to rise in anti-Semitic sentiments online. How do you differentiate between legitimate criticism of the Israeli politics and anti-Semitism in your discourse?
It's very easy. Zionism and Judaism are not the same thing.
Exactly.
You look at
Judaism is one of the monotheistic religions, actually.
Yes, you look at the presidents in American history, modern American history. All of them have been Christians. They say they're Christians, but they're all Zionists. In America, we have far more Christian Zionists than we do, Jewish Zionists. So to say that it's like just about Jewish people, it's not. And there's many Jewish people, as we all know, are not Zionists. The interesting thing, though, is that the Zionists try to say that Zionism and Judaism are the same thing, because then, of course, if you critique Zionism, they can say you're anti-Semitic, and that's just insane. And the last thing I'll say is, in America, our number one journalists who are exposing what's happening in the Gaza and Lebanon, Max Blumenthal, Jewish; Katie Halper, Jewish; Dan Cohen, Jewish; Aaron Mate, Jewish, and his father was a survivor of the concentration camps, I think Auschwitz. So, there's more. So it's very silly, and Israel looks so stupid when they try to compare the two.
So your vision for Palestine and the Lebanese resistance, based on the current geopolitical dynamics which have changed dramatically after October 7th and after the Israeli war on Lebanon in September, how do you perceive these geopolitical dynamics, and what do you foresee as the most effective strategies for Palestine and Lebanese resistance movements in the coming years?
Mao Zedong said that true political power only comes out of the barrel of a gun. And that is 100% true when you look at the resistance. Of course, it's very important that countries in this region of the world, that they maintain economic independence and sovereignty, and that they continue to strive for that and pursue closer relations with Russia and China in the multipolar world, as well as their cultural sovereignty is very important to maintain. But for the resistance, everyone should understand that there's been a lot of hype around the need to support the BDS, the Boycott, Divest, Sanction movement. And very good. I support the Boycott, Divest, Sanction movement, BDS. But even more so, if you want to see the end of this genocide and carnage and free Palestine and a sovereign, Lebanon, what you really need to support is HHH. Hezbollah, Hamas, Houthis, and also the IRGC.
Yeah, I've seen on X that you're a fan of Houthis' speeches as well.
Oh my God, Ansarallah. I love you guys, and I hope to visit you very soon. I think very soon we will. But they, the Ansarallah, they just really the example of, like Syed Hassan Nasrallah embodied, death before dishonor, and putting, they fear no one but God. Yeah. That's the truth.
Yeah. What personal experiences or influences have driven your passionate advocacy for these causes? I know that when you were in school or in university, you were very activist when it comes to environmental causes, to combating the use of plastic, nuclear energy. I don't know. You've been activist since an early age. What personal experience has created this passion for these causes?
I think really, it's like I was interested in my local community issues and stuff. You talked about the environmental stuff. I live next to the beach, so you want to keep your home clean. And then I started to get into politics and learning about history, and very soon I just realized everything I was told was a lie. I'm like, that's bad. Like we should be telling the truth. We should not be lying and getting paid for it and continuing these wars and stuff. So, and then I found a lot of Americans who actually had already been fighting for this truth and discovering this, and I try to learn as much as I can from them, and I still do. And I guess there's just so many lies that are told on a daily basis about these conflicts to just continue war, and that's what drives me.
Yeah. Given the polarized reactions to your content, how do you handle both support and criticism? And what advice would you offer to others engaging in contentious political discourse online? So we have to navigate criticism, definitely, and we have to understand the algorithms of the different social media platforms, those of Google on YouTube, of Meta on different social media platforms. The algorithms are biased towards one argument, one side of the narrative, not the other one. So how you navigate this criticism? How do you play around this criticism?
Well, you got to distinguish between legitimate criticism and people who are just being silly and attacking you just to attack you.
And the constructive criticism, maybe.
Yes. The constructive is good. Okay,
Yeah.
let's have a debate. Let's have a conversation.
Definitely.
Let's do that. But so much of it is just silliness and very cheap actors and stuff. So I think that you're always going to have that, especially if you are getting your message out to a lot of people. You're going to have a ton of people that are saying all sorts of crazy things. But yes, the algorithms also. I mean, the algorithms are very difficult to understand, and most
And they
people
are
just get censored.
changing rapidly, so you have to be agile in your content to keep
Yes.
pace with the changing algorithms as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and most of what I do is just reporting on news and giving my take on news. So it's like, as long as you don't do anything too offensive, then you should be, within the parameters of what's acceptable. At least on Twitter, on YouTube, Instagram, I don't take my advice because I'm banned. So not good advice.
On X, we can take your advice.
Yes.
And on your new the newest political show, which is Legitimate Targets, can we have a word or two on this show? How are you leveraging it?
Well, it's just a show dedicated to anti-imperialism and multipolarity, and understanding what this means and how this is developing. And we're interviewing tons of amazing people. Last week, as I mentioned, we sat down with Dr. Bassem Naim of Hamas in Doha, and we'll have a lot more interesting stuff out of this trip as well.
Yep. So, Jackson, I'd like to highly thank you for this very interesting episode. I know that you've always been a cause of many controversies by showing your perspective on anti-imperialism, as you've mentioned, and multipolarity. I hope that the world would become really multipolar, that anti-imperialism prevails, so that the people who have been suffering of these two syndromes, if I may say, would live happily ever after the many sufferings which we've witnessed in the aftermath of October 7th and the Israeli war on Lebanon in September. You were definitely one of the glorious voices which we appreciate, we highly appreciate. Thanks a lot for your appearance in Sردية.
Thank you so much, and thank you for giving me something to believe in and support as an American. It's amazing to see, so thank you.
Thanks a lot.